going to show how to use the saturation and clamping functions in Affinity Photo's procedural texture filter. Saturation and clamping are sort of utility functions. They're not real exciting, but they can be pretty useful. Here's an example. I have Perlin noise, and I'm passing it through a saturation filter, and I'm using the clamp version of this one, and then I'm going to change the offset, and I have a gradient map set to some high contrast colors, and so I'm just going to sweep through these, doing some complementary contrast here to show what it looks like. And like that. There are four functions in this group. They are saturate, clamp, clamp min, and clamp max. Saturate looks at your texture or all the pixels in it, and any value that is greater than 1, it's going to set that to 1. Any value that's less than 0, it's going to set to 0. Clamp X, if you just give it a single input, works pretty much the same as saturate. Clamp can also take a minimum and maximum value, and in that case, the minimum value can be less than 0 or negative, or greater than 0, and then the maximum can be greater than 1. So these minimum and maximum values can be pretty much any real number, as far as I can tell. The clamp minimum just takes a texture value and you can give it a minimum, and so the minimum can be less than 0 or it can be more than 0. So for example, if you set clamp minimum on a texture to -1, any value of t that's less than -1 will be assigned to -1. And then clamp maximum, if you do that, any value that's greater than 2 can be assigned to 2. These can also be patterns in themselves, so you could have the maximum be a Perlin noise pattern or something like that, and apply that to an oscillator and do some wacky stuff with these. So they don't just have to be constants here or numbers. All right, so I'm going to look at a example. I'll just delete this one, and I'll leave the gradient off. I'm going to add a live filter, procedural texture. I'm going to create a new one, assign it all 3 coordinates. I'm going to set a variable for my coordinates, v rx times ry, or rx, v equals vec2 rx ry times a divided by w. I'm going to set another variable. This one is going to be based on perlinhcubic. I've just set the octaves to 7 and the smoothness 0.5 for this example. I don't need that. And I'm calling it T1, so I'm just going to show what T1 looks like. I need to have my A variable here. And so there's my T1 variable, is my Perlin noise, nice and smooth looking. And you can see in the scope here that in some places it goes above 1, some places it goes below 1. So if I just apply the saturate to this one, like that, it doesn't really look any different. But if I multiply this by, I'll just put in a slider so I can scale it by something. I'll just call it I. And so if I scale this down, you can see that it sort of clipped off the tops of these. Now, just in case you don't believe me, I'll take that off, and now you can see it brings back those tops. So when I saturate it, it clips off those tops. I could also do a clamp here, like that, and that does the same thing. It also clipped it down at the bottom, which I can't see right now, but if I add an offset to it, like I'll call it OF, and I'll just have it go from 0 to 1 like that. Okay, there I was, there's where I was before. I can bring this up like that. So it sort of clips it like that, which isn't necessarily that useful. It looks similar to what it was before, and this gets clipped anyway when you know, it can't, you can't have any values greater than 1 or less than 0. Though I could have it now in this sort of compressed range. So where we really come into using this, I'm just going to label these fader. I forgot to label this one scale, and this one will be my offset. But what I want to do is add in another real value, and this is going to be my saturation. And I'll start with it at 1. And where I'm going to do that is to, inside of my clamp here, I'm going to multiply by the saturation value. So at 1, it doesn't do anything. But as I bring this up, it creates higher and higher contrast between these two. So I'm clamping, I'm calling it clamp. Saturation works the same way. Clamp is a little more versatile, so we'll look at that one later when we look at the different inputs to that. So it creates a high contrast image. I can make this, if I put in the H, the harmonic Perlin noise, like that, then it gives me this, this high contrast black and white image. You can assign that to colors through a gradient filter, or like that. Okay, but it makes this high contrast image, so yeah, I can have the, if I leave the fader all the way up, it's black and white, but I can also have it not quite so much contrast. So bring these down a little bit. So the other thing you could do is you could add in, I'll just use faders for these, you could add in a minimum and a maximum. And so these can use, I'll just label these. Like that, and then start with these down here. And so I could have on my clamp function, I could also have a minimum and a maximum. And these again can range from, they can go beyond just 0 and 1, but you could just leave them here. So now I can bring this up or bring this down. Now these values could also be textures. So I'll just create a new variable and see how that goes. Let's just make it an oscillator OSC, and let's just do it v.x like that. So there's my T2. So I could have T2 as the minimum, and maybe just make it, I'll make it a harmonic oscillator. Let's see how that looks. Okay, you know, it works. You can have it as another pattern as your minimum or maximum, or I could have added a noise function as the minimum or the maximum. Maybe I'll put my T2 as the maximum and change this to my minimum value again, like that. So now I've got T2 set as my maximum. I've got this slider as my minimum. Go come on like that, and then I've got the noise function coming in as the third factor, like that. So that's what you can do with this. I thought at one time that this would be good for image manipulation, but I can't really get, I mean, it's sort of a blunt instrument for image manipulation. So I wasn't really that excited about how I could manipulate images with this, although you could set this up. I've got a saturate set up on here, and you could set it up to, multiply it by this offset. In this case, it's a factor of 2. In this case, it's 1, so it would just go back to the regular image. But this one will have that saturated color on it. So you could do that if you wanted to, but it doesn't give me that results that are that interesting to me. I think it makes more sense to use it with something like Perlin noise, and that seems to have the most useful effect for this. Let me know if you have any comments or questions, and thanks for watching.